Delegates, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second part of our first day in our 15th plenary session, today, the 3rd of June, 2021. This second session will be dedicated to the second standing committee, and we will debate the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in our region and the measures for an effective economic recovery. As well as we will be discussing the issues of climate and environmental changes that affect our region and measures that we can consider to tackle this pressing challenge. Allow me to pass the floor to Honorable Pedro Roque, the chairman of the second standing committee, to start the session. Pedro, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Good afternoon. Excellencies, honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and dear friends. It is a pleasure to gather with you virtually on this fifth plenary session of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. It is great to see you all today, and I hope for us to meet in person again soon. I have the honor to open and chair the session dedicated to economic and environmental change challenges. I would like to start by highlighting the most significant achievements of the PAM Second Standing Committee and the PAM panel on trade and investment since our last plenary session in February 2021 in Athens. Today, we remain at the epicenter of the economic fallout caused by the pandemic. Supporting parliaments in this crisis has been a top priority for PAM, and I wish to warmly thank all my colleagues for their hard work in this particularly challenging period. The new PAM Special Rapporteur on the Economy, Honorable Ljubica Maksimchuk, has prepared a comprehensive review on the socio-economic effects of the pandemic on our countries. She will present her report and legislative recommendations later in this session. Already in July 2020, the PAM panel on trade and investments convened a virtual parliamentary conference dedicated to financial and monetary policies to support small and medium enterprises, fintech, venture capital, and startups in the context of the post-COVID economic recovery. Then, in March 2021, our Assembly, through its economic panel, joined forces with one of our new partners, the Parliamentary Assembly of Turkic-speaking countries, Turk-PA, to organize a high-level meeting on cross-regional cooperation in shaping a resilient economic recovery. The event focused on how to best implement digital transformations, green transition strategies, and efficient vaccine campaigns within recovery plans. What emerges from these two important events is that our countries are facing extraordinary difficulties in obtaining funding to respond to the emergency and create solid recovery plans. The Assembly is thus helping member parliaments to fostering public-private partnerships and facilitating access to alternative capital markets, such as business angels and Islamic finance. Furthermore, the PAM Economic Panel recognizes the need to reinforce credit lines and target schemes for small and medium enterprises, which represent the core of our region's economic fabric. To this aim, the Assembly is providing institutional support to initiatives intended to promote investments and business synergies across the Mediterranean, such as the Startup Market Project, coordinated by Honorable Centemero. The Assembly continues to benefit from a network of strategic partners, including the World Bank, the IMF, European Investment Bank, OECD, and relevant UN agencies such as UNIDO and UNCTAD. In synergy with these partners, PAM contributed to the most important multilateral fora dedicated to economic recovery, including, among others, the World Bank and the IMF winter and spring meetings, the OECD Global Parliamentary Network cycle of Conference on Transformative Recovery Strategies, and the UNCTAD Global Investment Promotion Conference. On these occasions, our partner experts have highlighted the need for policies with greater inclusivity, gender sensitivity, and an eye for the youth and the informal sector. PAM member states have also been called to invest in digitalization to foster entrepreneurship and make their economies globally competitive. Finally, the Assembly has been attentively following trends and challenges of those industrial sectors that have been hit the hardest in the region, namely trade and tourism. Our partnerships with the World Trade Organization, the World Travel and Tourist Council, and the UN World Tourism Organization tell us that these sectors will need to emerge from the crisis by prioritizing necessary safety measures. On this note, it is my pleasure to inform you that Honorable Dragan Krapovic, head of the new delegation of Montenegro to PAM, will take the lead of the tourism sectoral group within the PAM economic panel, and that Montenegro has also expressed the wish to host, as soon as the situation allows, in 2022, the first PAM WTO Forum on Trade and Investments, with a special session focused on the recovery of the tourism industry. This event was decided at our preparatory meeting with the WTO in 2019, and we are grateful to Montenegro for their kind invitations. Dear colleagues, another burning priority is the climate emergency, as it will be illustrated soon by the PAM Special Rapporteur on the Environment, Honorable Alain Perea. Our countries are particularly exposed to rising temperatures, water and food insecurity, and consequently to tensions for access to resources. In his reports and policy recommendations, Honorable Perea stresses the importance of seizing the opportunities that post-pandemic recovery plans are offering to us to forward climate action in the region. In this context, PAM promotes evidence-based policies. In December 2020, the Assembly co-organized a parliamentary meeting on strengthening the science policy interface for a green renaissance. Together with the United Nations Environmental Programme, Mediterranean Action Plan, UNEP-MAP, the event highlighted the need for national parliaments to integrate substantive adaptation plans into national economic recovery strategies. In this framework, PAM was also invited to sign a cooperation agreement with UNEP-MAP and to renew his mandate within the Mediterranean Commission for Sustainable Development, where PAM represents the parliamentary dimension. PAM closely monitored the zero net emissions targets announced by the major economies at the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement and during the climate summit hosted by the new United States administration in April 2021. Towards this direction, the Assembly worked with the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in supporting member parliaments to deliver more ambitious national determined contributions. With the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, and the Mediterranean COP scheduled for next autumn, PAM is advocating for the creation of a regional coalition for carbon neutrality. Towards this effort, The Assembly will join forces with UNFCCC, UNEP-MAP, and the Italian presidency of the G20 to organize next month's a parliamentary virtual conference in preparation for the upcoming regional and international climate negotiations. We count on your active contribution to this meeting. Let me conclude with one final highlight: the importance of green energy transition in our countries. In the past year, PAM reinforced ties with the Association of Mediterranean Energy Regulators, MEDREG, and the Mediterranean Transmission System Operations, MEDTSO, to promote coherent legislative practices for the development of cost-effective and sustainable energy systems. In parallel, the Assembly is collaborating with the University Partenhope of Naples on a policy report on energy security in the Mediterranean. Considering the importance of these topics, we are delighted to have His Excellency Francesco La Camera, Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, in a recorded video messages. Without further delay, I would like now give the floor to His Excellency La Camera. We have the pleasure to hear his keynote address.
Your Excellencies, Honorable Pedro Roque, President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean Second Standing Committee, high-level representatives of the Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address you all today. IRENA is highly engaged with countries across the region and enjoys a strong working relationship with regional institutions. As you know, I am a man of the Mediterranean myself, and I can assure that I take great interest in the region's development. I believe it is an important time for the region. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to disrupt our lives in a way that were previously unimaginable, leaving a great and social toll in its wake. In few places, this impact felt more than in the Mediterranean, which is faced with a dangerous mix of a rising unemployment, volatile oil prices, and a dramatic fall in tourism to the lockdown measures. While on one hand, the pandemic has presented immediate challenges to the Mediterranean economy, on the other hand, we cannot forget that climate change is an altogether more existential threat to the region's stability. Much of this scientific research points to a significantly hotter and drier region in the coming decade if global temperature continue to rise. We can think of our planet like the human body. Just 1 or 2 degrees above ideal temperature can be the difference between sickness and health. The energy transition can address both the long and short-term issues, and there are many reasons to be optimistic about the opportunities it presents in the Mediterranean. Firstly, it is blessed with vast renewables energy resources. If well harnessed, many countries can transform their energy system away from a crippling dependency on important fossil fuels to the use of indigenous renewables form of energy. This can bring newfound economic resilience through enhanced energy security, low carbon job creation, and economic diversification. At the same time, it can decrease air pollution, bringing drastic improvement in the overall health of Mediterranean citizens. The global energy transition is well underway. In the recent years, renewables have become the world's main source of new power generation. Last year, 8% of new power added globally was renewable, a record of 260 gigawatts. This trend is primarily driven by dramatic cost reduction and a growing momentum for the energy transition within the financial markets. Investors are already allocating capital away from fossil fuels and towards energy transition technologies, such as renewable or green hydrogen or modern bioenergy, proving that the transition is not just good for climate, it is also good for growth. Investing in energy transition technologies creates close to 3 times more jobs than fossil fuels do for each $1 million spending. It is encouraging to see the progress made in the Mediterranean. Since 2015, the region's collective renewables energy capacity has grown by close to 30%. According to our data, more than 250 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity is now operational across the region. Yet despite this progress, rapid population growth and economic expansion is driving increasing demand for energy. Countries can meet this demand in a way that supports both immediate economic needs and longer-term development and environmental needs by accelerating their energy transition. Ladies and gentlemen, now is the moment. This is the decade of action. While we remain in the midst of a crisis, global development, economic growth, and the climate emergency cannot wait. As governments continue to shape economic stimulus packages, the immediate response must align with the medium-long-term objective of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. You, as a member of national parliaments, will play a key role in shaping the action of your respective governments. I'm encouraged to see that the need for such an approach has been acknowledged in the Mediterranean region. The transition offers both a pathway out of COVID-induced economic crisis and a roadmap toward climate stability and inclusive development. The Euro-Mediterranean region can build a crisis response that puts local and regional economy at the forefront of sustained and yet sustainable growth and development. There is no a moment to lose. Thank you very much for your attention. Thanks a lot.
So this was the video recorded message from His Excellency Francesco La Camera, Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. I would now like to give the floor to Honorable Giulio Centemero, co-chair of the PAM panel on trade and investments in the Mediterranean, for an in-depth overview of the panel activities in the past year and a half. Honorable Centemero, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, President. Thank you, Chairman. It's an honor for me to be here, and I'm really happy to see so many friends participating to this General Assembly. Unfortunately, we're not in the same place, but it is as if we are all in the same place. This has been an extremely challenging year and a half, and before starting my summary of activities, I just would like to say a few words that this pandemic has taught us. This pandemic especially taught us that we need more love and compassion, and I hope the world, and especially our region, will go towards that path. So I'm intervening on the behalf also of my colleagues, Senator Loul Marbou from Morocco and Engineer Alessandro Ortiz. And I'm, of course, delighted to present the overview of what we did during this year. There were three main paths that we followed. The first one was attracting investment opportunities, because it's a key to have a rapid economic recovery, especially after pandemic. The second is job creation, in order to maintain the jobs and to create new jobs right after the pandemic. And the third path that we follow, it was the one to preserve trade and tourism across the region. So going to the first part, to the first area of intervention, which is attracting investment opportunities, and I would say also creating liquidity in general, also through the creation of new secondary markets. It has to be said, like you, Pedro, highlighted, that the core of the Mediterranean region are the small and medium enterprises. And these are also the core economic focus, the backbone also of the Gulf countries, so both regions. And it's vital that we preserve these companies, these corporations from bankruptcy, from failing, so that we need to create not just new rules, but also more liquidity and more opportunities by, for example, harmonizing markets and by looking for new markets. Indeed, the Assembly is partnering with major international financial entities and institutions, working with universities. In particular, we're working with universities and incubators and other subjects, also like private equity and investment funds, to create a truly and genuine startup market of the Mediterranean. We are now signing the papers, the MOUs, in order to involve all the key players, and soon it will be a reality, a place not just to exchange experiences and best practice in lawmaking, but a place to match demand and offer, and a place online and offline to do culture about entrepreneurship and about finance. We're working, I was saying, with strategic partners like UNCTAD, UNIDO, WTO, the European Investment Bank, to provide platforms for exchanging legislative strategies towards adopting common investment standards and promoting, for example, green and sustainable finance across the region. With the organization of parliamentary high-level meetings and personal exchanges with other parliamentarians dedicated to economic recovery, the panel was also engaged in reinforcing policy dialogue between the public and the private sector, because the cooperation of the public and the private sector also upon smart schemes of risk management is key for the recovery right now. These occasions were useful for PAM parliamentarians to engage with experts on innovative financial instruments. For example, you were mentioning Islamic and ethical finance or ESG. Talking about job creation, in order not just to maintain the pre-pandemic levels of employment, but also to create new jobs, we have to say that, of course, that employment rates speed up during the pandemic, and the market of work has changed. Let's think about the phenomenon of the smart working. This is why job creation and targeted protection schemes for the most vulnerable workers, for example, the youth, the women, the informal workers, and migrants or refugees, have been the heart of the activities of the panel today, up to date. We have been particularly active in supporting member parliaments to share the best practices about legislative measures to boost employment opportunities. We had a very long debate about that. Other targets that can foster job creation in our region are based on innovation, circular economy, decarbonization. We have witnessed especially during pandemic, a lot of conflicts, small or big, because of the possession of sources of fossil fuels. But like Mr. La Camera of Irina was mentioning before, we go towards another world, towards a fossil-free world, and there are several studies that shows how important is for the northern shores and the southern shores of the Mediterranean to collaborate, for example, in producing hydrogen. So this is definitely the future. This can create more jobs. And let's remember that the dividend of this is infinitely better and higher than the cost of conflicts. Combining economic recovery strategies with energy transition in our countries is an excellent opportunity to create jobs, as I was saying, and to give a future to our children, to the next generation, to the environment, the beautiful environment of the Mediterranean area. Moreover, the Pan-Economic Panel has been working side to side with other parliamentary assemblies, like the OECD Global Parliamentary Network and the Parliamentary Network at the World Bank and the IMF. The next meeting will be, for example, next week, in order to improve regulatory convergence on digitalization and in order to support labor market integration. Last but not least, and in Italian is saying that in Italy, 14% of the GDP is due to tourism. We advocate for the critical support needed to save trade and tourism. The pandemic restricted the movements of people, and many prime ministers also are advocating for the sustain of tourism. For example, I saw a tweet of President Macron like yesterday saying France is open to tourism. Or Mr. Draghi in Italy, our prime minister, said, start booking the hotels for the summer. Well, it's the situation forced us to question the resilience of our supply chains, to reschedule or cancel travels and international commitments, and brought tourism to the nadir. We have to get it back to the azimuth. For this reason, the panel operated a systemic monitoring of trends and best practices for a revival of the trade and tourism industries across our region. We bolstered the implementation of trade promotion programs, for example, the South Days initiatives organized by the Italian Trade Agency and the Confederation of Italian Industries to reinforce trade and business synergies between the two shores of the Mediterranean. As for tourism, we strengthened ties with the World Travel and Tourism Council and the UN World Tourism Organization, which will go to its own assembly very soon, in order to ensure PAM parliamentarians could receive the best policy advice for a speedy and sustainable relaunch of the sector. Also towards inclusive tourism, because no one has to be left behind. Furthermore, the panel has recently established a sectoral group dedicated to tourism. And I'm happy to announce, like you did before, Pedro, that Honorable Krapovic from Montenegro is the chair of the sector of the panel, and himself will provide a more detailed picture of the group's scope and goals. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to conclude my intervention, my speech, It is clear that what Mr. La Camera said from Irina, it's very important, also because, like Latins used to say, primum vivere deinde philosophare. Primum vivere means we have to preserve our environment. We have to go towards environmental friendly policies. We have to go towards sustainability. And this is possible by exchanging best practices and by funding research. Looking at the future endeavors, the PAM Economic Panel will participate in the upcoming WTO Ministerial Conference, the UNCTAD World Investment Forum, and the annual meetings of the World Bank and IMF, both spring and fall meetings. Furthermore, the panel will keep on engaging its members on the policy areas that I just mentioned. Thank you all for your kind attention. I hope to see you soon, and good luck to the following panelists. Thank you, Pedro.
Grazie mille, Giulio. Thank you for addressing our plenary session and for the complete overview of the panel activities in the past year and a half. I will now like to give the floor to Honorable Dragan Krapovic, Head of the Delegation of Montenegro to PAM and Chair of the Economic Panel Sectoral Group on Tourism. Please, Honorable Krapovic, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, distinguished Chairperson of the PAM Second Standing Committee, Mr. Pedro Roque, Your Excellencies, distinguished PAM Secretary General Ambassador Sergio Piazzi, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I am truly delighted to have the opportunity to address you on this occasion on behalf of the Parliament of Montenegro's delegation at the 15th PAM plenary session, and to express words of gratitude for the opportunity to have the Parliament of Montenegro be the host of the next PAM WTO Euro-Mediterranean Parliamentary Forum. I would like to use this opportunity to express my conviction that when the conditions are met to have a meeting in person, which is currently determined by the ongoing pandemic, Montenegro, in cooperation with Parliamentary Assembly of Mediterranean and World Trade Organization, will be fully inspired and to responsibly dedicate itself with the same intensity as today to organize such an important event. I am convinced that it will open a dialogue and offer specific recommendations on the topic of trade and investment, with special focus on tourism as this sector's recovery after the pandemic. Montenegro, as the host of this event, nowadays is a modern Mediterranean tourist destination with international reputation, a country that takes care of its natural, social, and economic resources. This year, we are marking a special jubilee since becoming the first ecological state in the world 30 years ago, which is written in the first article of our Constitution, thus highlighting our conviction that the state is responsible for conserving nature and healthy environment. Montenegro is a country with a 1,000-year-long tradition, history, culture, open to new ideas, people, opportunities, and of course, partnership. We are looking forward to our next joint and in-person meeting here in our country at the Euro-Mediterranean Parliamentary Forum. For a while, Montenegro has been insufficiently active within the Parliamentary Assembly of Mediterranean. However, by forming a delegation with the new term of the Parliament, we confirm our willingness to continue the development of overall cooperation with the countries, both our region and, of course, the Mediterranean. Advocating that the civic concept of a modern state based on the rule of law and respect for diversity, Montenegro, as a NATO member, and hopefully the first ex-member of the European Union, is currently developing good neighborly relations based on mutual respect and strengthening economic exchange, which is the key approach to building mechanisms of sustainable partnership and mutual solidarity. The PAM Secretariat informed the parliamentary delegation that within the PAM panel of trade and investment, which aims to propose specific parliamentary actions to promote and support trade and investment in the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions, the tourism sector group has been activated and I have been nominated to chair it. Therefore, I would like to point out, as someone who has spent a significant part of his life in the tourism sector, as a former mayor of the Montenegrin tourism metropolis, the town of Budva, as the current chairperson of the Committee of Tourism, Agriculture, Ecology and Spatial Planning at the Parliament of Montenegro, that I will be very much delighted to put in the necessary effort to raise the tourism sector group to the level appreciating, of course, the fact, owing to all their blessings determined by the geographical position of our Mediterranean. All Mediterranean countries, of course, largely depend on the industry of tourism. Despite most predictions that the recovery of tourism worldwide can be expected no sooner than 2023 or even 2024, I firmly believe that the recovery of Mediterranean will be strongly felt as soon as upcoming year 2022, due to contributing factors such as, of course, the tourist infrastructure in our countries, our favorable geographical position, natural attractiveness, and of course, security, first and foremost in terms of public health. Inspired by the progress in the fight of ongoing global surge as the greatest challenge of our generation, I am convinced that through parliamentary diplomacy as a very useful tool for support for international dialogue, which is needed now more than ever, we will manage to overcome impending obstacles and thus create conditions for the continuation of prosperity for all individual Mediterranean states. Once again, I offer my deepest gratitude and kind regards. Thank you very much.
Hvala, dragi Dragan Krapovic. Thank you for addressing our assembly. And now I have the pleasure to invite Honorable Ljubica Maksimchuk, PAM Special Rapporteur on the Economy, to take the floor and present her findings on the socio-economic impacts on the pandemic on our region.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, it is a pleasure to participate for the first time in the plenary session of PAM, and a true honor to act as a rapporteur on economy. Dear colleagues, the COVID-19 crisis is putting extreme pressure on the economic and social situation in the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions. We are facing the worst economic recession since the Great Depression. GDPs fell up to 44% in the countries with the most vulnerable economies. Border closures reminded us of the fragility of global value chains and the importance of financial diversification. Lockdowns and quarantines push entire industries on the verge of collapse. This is why, in my role as PAM Rapporteur on the economy, I have conducted a system-wide analysis on the socio-economic impact of the pandemic in the wider Mediterranean region. Today, we are at a turning point in our fight against COVID-19. Vaccination campaigns have allowed us to see the light at the end of the tunnel. They give us a glimpse of hope to get our economies back on their feet. Our task as policymakers is substantial. We have to learn from this crisis, build back better, and make sure to leave no one behind. We have to turn the Mare Nostrum into a more inclusive, green and sustainable place for current and future generations. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot go back to the old normal. The financial survival of our countries will depend on forward-looking and holistic recovery plans which target the specific vulnerabilities and needs of their domestic economies. This being said, I would like to underscore three main policy areas identified in my report. First, the relaunch of our economies should be based on inclusivity. We have no other option but to seek a recovery that shrinks socio-economic inequalities. To do so, fiscal support schemes should prioritize those individuals hit hardest by the crisis. Above all, women, youth, and workers in the informal sector. Access to liquidity for small and emerging businesses will be crucial. In our regions, small and medium enterprises serve as primary employment provider for valuable groups and people at risk of marginalization. The failure rate of these enterprises has increased by 9% compared to pandemic levels. For this reason, the Assembly is advocating for stimulus packages to mitigate bankruptcies and rehabilitate the regional business environment. To this aim, the PAM Economic Panel will continue to work with major international financial institutions to promote harmonized legislative frameworks and to stimulate local and foreign investments across the region. Second, another backbone of recovery plans should be a revival of our region's tourism sector. Before the pandemic, tourism accounted for 13.3% of total regional GDP and 11.5% of employment. Lockdowns, travel restrictions, and social distancing measures have provoked high job losses and financial setbacks in the industry. These economic contradictions risk being prolonged in time due to uncertain regulations and fear of traveling. Our parliaments are faced with a delicate challenge, establishing harmonized guidelines and safety measures to facilitate the revival of tourism across the region. Targeted financial policies and strong coordination among our countries will be crucial. To these efforts, PAM activated a special task force dedicated to tourism within the Economic Panel, chaired by the Delegation of Montenegro. The sectoral group will work with our partners at the UN World Tourism Organization and the World Travel and Tourism Council to promote the exchange of legislative strategies and best practices for a rapid and sustainable relaunch of this vital sector. Last but not least, the recovery is an opportunity to accelerate the green and digital transitions. Environmental sustainability and economic prosperity are interdependent. Our region's designation by the UN as a climate hotspot should worry us all. Policymakers are urgently called to align national strategies with the objectives of the Paris Agreement and the UN Agenda 2030. Recovery strategies offer an extraordinary occasion to do so. Today, we know that this will not only help preserve the beauty and the biodiversity of our region, but it also creates new jobs and business opportunities. Digitalization can strongly contribute to reshaping the regional trajectory of development towards more sustainable models. Frequent lockdown measures have expanded the application of digitally based technologies. Yet, The differences in internet usage among northern and southern Mediterranean countries remain sharp. Improvements in digital services and their accessibility should become one of our priorities. Integrating green and digital reforms in the post-pandemic recovery plans will strategically enhance the competitiveness of our region on a global scale. This is why PAM has been reinforcing ties with its partners, including the UN Environment Programme, the OECD, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the IMF, to support the development of effective science policy interfaces for a green reboot based on innovation and decarbonization. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, against this backdrop, I have prepared a set of concrete policy recommendations to support member parliaments in addressing this severe and unprecedented socio-economic crisis. In particular, I have stressed the importance of targeted financial and fiscal measures to assist vulnerable businesses and individuals, and I have invited PAM Parliaments to reinforce cooperation on the relaunch of the tourism industry and the acceleration of the green and digital transition. I'm aware that the Turkish delegation has raised some comments on the report and recommendations that it will take the floor during the parliamentary debate. I thank them for their precious contribution in this process, and I look forward hearing their and other delegations' comments. I would now kindly ask the PAM Secretary General, Ambassador Sergio Piazzi, to read the full list of recommendations.
Thank you very much. I will proceed with the reading the recommendations for this report. I, the Rapporteur on Economy, on behalf of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. A, alarmed by the severe and unprecedented socioeconomic crisis precipitated by the lockdown measures and travel restrictions implemented to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. B, aware of the disproportional impact that the COVID-19 containment measures have had across industries and individuals, with particular attention to youth, women, and other minority groups. C, convinced that the need to extend the support schemes to ensure fiscal relief to those employed on the periphery of the formal economy. D, concerned that barriers to capital, credit lines, and adequate financial support could threaten the viability of many small and medium-sized enterprises in the Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf regions. E, noting that the COVID-19 pandemic has placed considerable stress on the global supply chains and recognizing the importance of strengthening trade arrangements which reinforce regional economic development and resilience to global shocks. F, recognizing the importance of the tourism industry to Euro-Mediterranean and Gulf economies and the severe financial impacts of travel ban and social distancing measures on the sector. G, supporting the commitment of PAM to work with the multilateral institutions such as the World Trade Organization and the World Tourism Council to build a comprehensive understanding of the immediate and long-term challenges faced by the tourism industry. H, aware that lockdown measures have revealed the immediate need for expanding access to internet services and digital skill for business and remote education systems. I, supporting the expansion of IT infrastructure to facilitate the utilization of resources to further access and use of digital technologies. J, convinced that collaboration and joint effort of national parliaments on restarting economy activity and lifting travel restriction will be essential in rehabilitating the regional economy K, committed to the implementation of policy which facilitate an inclusive and sustainable recovery. L, recognizing the need for harmonization between legislation and the commitment made through nationally determined contribution to ensure economic policy reflect climate goals. M, recognizing the value of the strategic partnership of PAM that PAM have served the interest of parliamentarians and the Mediterranean as a whole. Number 1, I call on parliaments to conceive and continue implementing measures which provide employment and fiscal relief while ensuring that such measures are effective and targeted those industries and individuals who have been most impacted. 2, reiterate the importance of continuing support to vulnerable business and segment of the population, even once the epidemiological threat posed by COVID-19 pandemic has decreased. Number 3, encourage PAM Parliament to reinforce targeted schemes which grant SMEs access to credit lines and other forms of institutional support, while also bridging the divide between SMEs and the traditional financial institutions. Number 4, invite PAM Parliaments to resume talks surrounding the Arab-Maghreb Trade Union and Euro-Mediterranean Free Trade Area, which would strengthen the regional economy and lessen dependence on global supplies chain. 5, call for greater coordination to support the Mediterranean tourist industry by collaborating on travel and quarantine policies which may hasten the relaunch of this vital sector. 6, stress the importance of implementing policies which expand the use and access of digital technologies, particularly through greater investment in IT infrastructure. 7, urge PAM Parliaments to implement recovery policies in line with the Agenda 2030 and the Paris Agreement in order to facilitate a sustainable recovery. Last, number 8, invite its Secretariat to reinforce PAM ties with international financial institutions, the World Bank, IMF, European Central Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Investment Bank, and the UN and the EU relevant bodies, as well as to continue cooperating with UNCTAD, OECD, World Trade Organization, the WTTC, and the World Trade Organization, and the Arab Forum for Environment and Development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sergio. And I also want to thank Honorable Maxim Tkachuk for sharing her analysis and her policy recommendations with us. Now, it is time to open the floor to our delegates for any comments they may have on this particular report. I would like to remind the delegates that considering the virtual format this year, there will be no vote on the policy recommendations. And I will also that in your intervention, you should be concise and stay focused on the topics of the report. Now, I would like to give the floor in first place to the delegation of Greece. Hello. Yes, please go ahead.
Dear Chair, Director General, dear MPs, the COVID-19 pandemic has laid the emphasis on the importance to collaborate in between the countries of the Mediterranean region, aiming at peace, stability, and prosperity in the region. Through the mechanisms of collaboration that are being promoted, we are trying to encourage economic sustainability and the mitigation of COVID-19 pandemic impacts on sectors that have been affected greatly, such as tourism, trade, and investments. In this framework, Greece has already introduced a series of measures, and it is continuing to pursue this direction. We have started with a national chapter called Operation Freedom that has to do with the massive population of the country. It is an action plan of vaccination that will allow us to reassert our life to free life in collaboration with between Greece, Cyprus, and many member states of the EU and the Euromed region. We're trying to improve Greece's competitiveness, open up the country with respect to investments and tourism, and of course to capitalize as best as possible on innovative ideas regarding entrepreneurship. Another sector that we should definitely focus on is the sustainability of small and medium-sized enterprises, many of which have been largely and gravely affected by the pandemic. Recently, I would like to point out, OECD congratulated Greece for the measures undertaken during the pandemic in order to support SMEs. We feel that it is a necessity to create an institutional framework that will allow the Euro-Mediterranean region countries to work together in order to facilitate mechanisms of financing and the use of innovative technologies, focusing primarily on exchange of information, experiences, and know-how to the benefit of all parties involved. We are supporting an enlargement of the collaboration that already exists between PAM and institutions like OECD, the World Trade Organization, and COP partners with respect to supporting SMEs and micro enterprises and startups. The PAM member states will also undertake measures to facilitate moving on with an emphasis on the younger generation. We know that it is imperative for us to take steps in that direction by allowing for vocational training that will have as a guide openness and a focus on innovative technologies. Today, this debate should also bear in mind that there has been an important reform towards making these goals come to fruition. I have tried, therefore, to demonstrate what we have done in my country so far during the pandemic, and trust me that we have managed to create a safe country, thus becoming a safe tourist destination. And this is why I would like to invite you all to enjoy your holidays in Greece this summer.
Evkaristo, thank you. The second intervention will be by my colleague Emília Cerqueira from the Portuguese delegation. You have the floor. Tem a palavra.
Thank you, Mr. President, my dear colleague Pedro Roque, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. I would like to begin by congratulating Honorable Liubica, excuse the name is a little stranger for a Portuguese, for her excellent work in this report and the recommendation I wish endorse. I also wish to express my appreciation to PAM for the valuable initiatives and partnerships with key stakeholders that have been established, with which will be fundamental for the recovery stages. The world where we live today is significantly different from the one which last year in a plenary section took at Greece, Athens, exactly, the damaging effects of the disease on economic sectors and our living standards are unprecedented and will have long-lasting effects. And yet, we must consider that the economic impact of COVID-19 is not the same among all Mediterranean countries. Countries that were already in weaker economic conditions are now in even more fragile circumstances. The inequality gap between countries has become deeper, and access to economy recovery mechanisms is not uniform. Small and medium-sized enterprises account for 19% of jobs and 99% of business in the region. Many of these companies are linked to the bank tourism industry, which has seen these activities completely suspended due to restrictions on circulations. Several companies in all sectors have already gone bankrupt. Others risk the same fate, which has already resulted and will result on job and income losses that will mainly affect women and young people. We must rebuild a stable economy, a recovery model that fosters more resilient, inclusive and sustainable trade between countries, as well as new forms of economic cooperation. Allow me to treat this word, cooperation instead of individualism, multilateralism instead of unilateralism, and solidarity over cooperation are key to winning the battle against COVID-19. We need to cooperate to make vaccines equitably accessible around the world. We must make regional agreements, work to improve the funding of recovery plans, and promote rational decisions making by global trade agencies. And we need to strengthen coordination between member states on issues such as health and movement of people, especially in areas that have an impact on tourism, industry, and related sectors. Attention must also to be paid to assess new information and communication technologies. COVID-19 pushed the need for digitization of economy and service to the top of the priorities of the Euro-Mediterranean agenda. And yet again, access to those tools is not equitable and hinders of deployment for the most fragile. The pandemic has brought temporary benefits for the environment, such as reduced the gas emissions, but the pressures and land and marine biodiversity remains, and we cannot ignore it. Without a rational use of the Mediterranean natural resource, we risk irreparably compromising access to these resources within a few years. The post-pandemic should be accompanied by reposition of societies regarding their mode of organizations, behaviors and lifestyles, and by economic transformation involving towards a fair, most prosperous and efficient growth model through the regenerative use of resources within the limits of natural systems. We need the active involvement of all parliaments in addressing the issues of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Before I finish, allow me to share some words about Portugal. The COVID-19 pandemic led to a significant decrease of industry turnover, which fell by 80.7% in April 2020. Some sectors, such as automobile production, are affected by 95% and electrical energy by 13.8%. The export of goods fell 13% last year. In what concerns service, the most affected sector was undoubtedly tourism. We are a tourist country. All this has accompanied by the deterioration of the labor market with a rise of unemployment and in the number of workers on layoff. To face this scenario, a 20-year economic recovery plan, 2020-2030, is currently underway. The plan defines guidelines to public policies involving the different economic sectors, listing ideas and structuring projects to rebuild the country. Dear colleagues, now more than ever, we need a resilient economic recovery that encourages cooperation among all. I hope that we can overcome this pandemic together and soon as possible. Thank you for all.
Muito obrigado, Emília. Now it's time to the delegation of the United Arab Emirates to have the floor. The Emirates delegation.
السيدات والسادة، في البداية أود أن أشكر السيدة المقررة على ما طرحته من توصيات متعلقة بموضوع الأثر الاقتصادي بكوفيد-19 في المنطقة الأورو-متوسطية والخليج العربي في عام 2020. استجابة السياسات لتحقيق انتعاش فعال، وفي هذا الشأن نرى أن هناك العديد من الآثار الاقتصادية التي ألقت بظلالها على المنطقة، وتتلخص في: أولاً، انكماش الاقتصاد العالمي، حيث تقدر المنظمة التعاون الاقتصادي والتنمية انحسار النمو السنوي للناتج المحلي الإجمالي بنسبة 2% من كل شهر. يشهد تطبيق الإجراءات العزل مع توقع أن يتجاوز التأثير الاقتصادي لهذه الأزمة ما شهده من انكماش بعد الأزمة المالية في عام 2008، ويترتب على ذلك تزايد نسبة البطالة في كل مناطق العالم ومنها المنطقة الأورو-متوسطية والخليج. ثانياً، تسبب وباء كورونا في تكلفة اقتصادية هائلة بسبب حدوث صدمة سلبية في الطلب والعرض، حيث اتخذت البلدان سلسلة من إجراءات الاحتواء التي تحد من النقل والنشاط الاقتصادي، والتي تؤثر بشدة على قدرة الناس على الذهاب إلى العمل وعلى الشراكات المواصلة المساهمة في الاقتصاد. كما أدى انخفاض أسعار النفط الخام إلى فرض ضغوط إضافية، مثل انخفاض الاستثمارات من دول الخليج التي تعد أكبر مستثمر في المنطقة، فضلاً عن انخفاض التحويلات المالية من دول الخليج بشكل كبير وفرص العمل فيها، حيث تقدر خسائر المنطقة المتوقعة بحوالي 42 مليار دولار من الناتج المحلي الإجمالي لعام 2020. ثالثاً، ارتباط الآثار الاقتصادية لأزمة كوفيد بغيرها من الآثار البيئية، حيث من المتوقع أن تضع الأزمة ضغوطاً إضافياً على قطاع المياه في منطقة البحر الأبيض المتوسط، الذي يواجه تحديات كبيرة مثل تزايد الطلب على إمدادات المياه من أجل تطبيق تدابير النظافة الصحية التي أوصت بها السلطات الصحية، إلى جانب احتمال انخفاض الاستثمارات الرأسمالية وإيرادات الخدمات العامة. لذلك يجب علينا عدم إغفال هذا الجانب من الآثار الاقتصادية. السيدات والسادة، في إطار ما سبق نقترح التوصيات التالية: أولاً، صياغة استراتيجية مشتركة بين المنطقة الأورو-متوسطية والخليج للتعامل مع مرحلة ما بعد كوفيد-19 من خلال خطط عمل تضمن الاستشراف المبكر للفرص والتحديات ولمواجهة أي تداعيات قائمة أو محتملة، وتعزيز جاهزية القطاعات الحكومية والخاصة، وصياغة مفاهيم جديدة لرفع مستوى الكفاءة الاقتصادية. ثانياً، في حين التركيز الحالي ينصب على معالجة الأزمة الصحية الفورية وتدابير الانتعاش الاقتصادي الناجمة عن كوفيد-19، على الحكومات والبرلمانات عدم تقويض الإجراءات اللازمة للحد من التهديدات الناجمة عن تغيير المناخ وندرة المياه وتلوث المياه والهواء وغيرها من المسائل البيئية. ثالثاً، ضرورة تعزيز التعاون والعمل الإقليمي والدولي للحد من آثار كوفيد-19 على كل الأصعدة، وبالأخص ما يتعلق بتحقيق التنمية المستدامة من خلال معالجة الأسباب الجذرية التي تحول دون تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة في العديد من البلدان، والعمل على استثمار القدرات المحلية للتعافي من الأزمات وموجات التهديدات العالمية الأخرى. السيدات والسادة، سعياً من دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة لمكافحة انتشار وباء كوفيد-19 والحد من آثاره السلبية من منظور تحقيق التنمية المستدامة، تبنيت دولة الإمارات العديد من الإجراءات الاقتصادية، ومنها: تصدرت دولة الإمارات دول العالم في الفحوصات التي أجرتها للمواطنين والمقيمين، وأنشأت أكثر من 14 مركز للفحص من المركبات في أنحاء الدولة للحفاظ على صحة المواطنين والمقيمين والحرص على استمرارية الأعمال. أيضاً تبنت دولة الإمارات خطط دعم وتحفيز وصلت قيمتها إلى 70 مليار دولار، كما تبنيت الحكومات المحلية خطط تحفيز متفاوتة، وأعفت الحكومة المقيمين من أي مخالفات تتعلق بانتهاء إقاماتهم ومدة تصريحات الإقامة لكل الموجودين على أرض الدولة. كذلك قامت دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة مباشرة بتفعيل نظام التعليم عن البعد لحوالي 1.2 مليون طالب في المدارس الحكومية والخاصة، ووفرت الحكومة الدعم التقني والبنية التحتية للمدارس الخاصة لضمان استمرار التعليم للجميع. كما وفرت شركات الاتصالات الإنترنت مجانا للأسر التي ليس لديها الخدمات لتمكنها من التعلم عن بعد. وأشكركم على حسن استماعكم.
Shukran jazilan. Now the floor goes to Jordan. My dear friend Alia Buran, President of the First Standing Committee. You have the floor.
Thank you, dear. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be able to contribute to this very important session. Thank you for the great work that the Second Standing Committee has done under your very able leadership. And it's extremely important that we are tackling the collaborative issues that have to do with the environment, with the economic issues, as well as with the social dimensions. I would like also to thank so much the delegation of the United Arab Emirates and Portugal for highlighting the importance of collaboration and regional collaboration. I know that each and every country is focusing on its own issues in terms of the COVID, in terms of vaccination, in terms of the education, in terms of the social and economic issues. But the way I see it, if we don't introduce the regional cooperation in a way that will be able to safeguard those natural resources and hence the livelihood of the people thereafter, I think we will be just working within the framework of each country without having that regional benefits that the different delegations are talking about. I'm referring to the geopolitical aspect of climate change. I'm talking about the fact that if one country has drought, the other country has drought as well, because we are in the same terrain. The political aspect behind the collaborative efforts in our part of the world is extremely important, as it is the case in the northern part of the Mediterranean. We all worry about shared resources. We all worry about the upstream, downstream management of water bodies. We all worry about the very high salination that is affecting our crops. That's why the importance of regional cooperation backed up by the economic and political stability is something that I look extremely dearly. Because of the peace agreement between Jordan, Israel, and Egypt, at one point we were looking into establishing some R&D centers in the Jordan Valley, both us, the Israelis and the Egyptians, and the Palestinians, to be able to look at the proper cash crops that will be able to tolerate more humidity, more salinity, and less water. Because all the countries that in our part of the world have the same issues when it has to do with the climate change, as well as the implication of climate change. Jordan has something to offer, Israel has something to offer, Egypt has something to offer, Palestine has something to offer. So the collaborative effort, this is something that is really important. We can do something in one quadrant, Israel can do something in another quadrant, and so does the Palestinians and the Egyptians. But when you have the totality of the solution that will impact positively the related issues to climate change, to salinity, to the technical know-how, the transfer of knowledge, I think this is a win-win situation that we have to aspire to. I know that the Emirates, the United Arab Emirates, they excel in renewable energy. We have also an important aspect when it comes to the solar energy. Jordan is excelling in that part. The collaborative effort on these issues will be highly appreciated so that we are able to look at it from a regional collaborative matter, as my dear friends from the Federal National Council of the United Arab Emirates stipulated. And so is the case with Portugal. I know that they have an amazing opportunity when it comes to achieving the goals of the SDGs. It's also important to have that kind of scientific relationship where the transfer of knowledge will be from country to another. south to south, and south to north. This is how I look at it. This is the geopolitical aspect of the importance of PAM. This, when it comes to everything, when it comes to the issues of COVID, when it comes with education, and when it comes to the environment, this is something that we have really to stop and look hard into the benefits of regional cooperation. I have always been saying, let's put the political differences aside and let's keep the science, the technology, issues related to the environment, to education and health immune from the political issues that we are suffering from in our part of the world. This is my positive message, and this is what I wanted to say and contribute. Thanking you again, Pedro, for your leadership, and thank you for the amazing reports that you have been doing and the great work for the last year and a half. Thank you again.
Shukran, my dear Alia. Thank you for your intervention and for your kind words. Now the floor goes to San Marino, Honorable Adele Tonini.
Thank you. Dear President, dear colleague, I would like to thank colleague Maxim Tsuk for the high-level report. COVID-19 has had an enormous economic impact for San Marino. I would like to remind that San Marino is not a member of the European Community and does not have access to European funds. But first of all, San Marino had to work hard to overcome the difficulties encountered in procurement the vaccines. The authorization for the use of the Sputnik 5 vaccine within its territory, granted by the government of San Marino, has allowed the Republic from the last February 23 to receive the first doses for administration the resident population, giving priority to medical and social health staff, to the elderly and people at greater risk, as required by the National Vaccination Plan. An important step for San Marino that demonstrates the importance of synergy between states. The battle against COVID-19 must have no geopolitical connotation and must know no borders. Small European states, such as San Marino, must be able to ensure a uniform vaccination campaign also throughout their territory, in general interest of defeating this disease as soon as possible. As of May 21, the massive anti-COVID-19 vaccination campaign in San Marino is deemed to have ended. The goal of complete immunization has been passed in over 70% of its vaccinable population. Concerning the type of vaccination used, the 88.6% of administration between first, second, and single doses took place with the Sputnik 5 vaccine, while the remaining 11.4% were carried out with the vaccine Pfizer. San Marino is ever closer to becoming a COVID-free country again. Only 2 positive in-home isolation are present on the territory, and in the last 24 hours, there are no new positive cases and no hospitalizations. The purchase of Sputnik 5 was added to the doses provided by the agreement previously signed with Italy, supplementing our stocks in order to protect the entire San Marino population in the shortest possible time and to fill the gap compared to the beginning of the European vaccination campaign. Approval of the Russian Sputnik 5 vaccine by the European Medicine Agency is expected by June. We have a continuous dialogue with Italy, and there will be new meetings for the recognition of free movement within that territory, as we hope also for others. A study is in progress by the Spallanzani Hospital in Rome for the qualitative and quantitative evaluation of the Sputnik 5, but at the moment is the best vaccine in the world for its 99.3% efficacy after the second dose, while only with the first doses, there is an efficacy close to or perhaps superior to the main vaccine in circulation. For this reason, we believe it's important to encourage recognition of Sputnik 5 also for the purpose of obtaining the European Digital COVID Certificate, the European Vaccination Pass for free circulation in Europe, to give concrete response to the recovery of the tourism sector and to small and medium enterprise that are representing for San Marino the pivot of the economic system, but also the sector most tried by the pandemic. Finally, the opportunity of receiving anti-COVID-19 vaccination with the Sputnik 5 vaccine by citizens residing in other countries all over the world, excluding Italy, is arousing significant interest. There are already 23 people who have taken advantage of this possibility in the first days of the start of reservation, and a few hundred bookings have already arrived from the hotels for the reservation center, and they are already scheduled for the vaccination in coming days. Thank you very much.
Grazie mille. Now the floor goes to my dear friend Belal Qassem from Palestine.
شكرا سيدي، وشكر خاص للسيد الزميل بيدرو روكا على التقرير المهم ودوره المهم أيضا في البام وما يقوم به من أجل البام والمتوسط. مجددا نقول إنه بفعل استمرار الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وبفعل الحصار المستمر على قطاع غزة قبل العدوان الأخير وبعد العدوان، وبفعل استمرار سياسات حكومة الاحتلال اليمينية المتطرفة السلطة القائمة بالاحتلال، وبفعل تأثير فيروس كورونا كوفيد 19، فإن الاقتصاد الفلسطيني تعرض لأزمات حادة، وبدوره تأثرت الحياة العامة للشعب الفلسطيني بأكمله، وهذا الوضع نتيجة الحصار والاحتلال، ونقل تأثيره على حياة الشعب الفلسطيني وسبل عيشهم، وهو حقيقة ما خلق أزمة حقيقية في الأمن الغذائي، في نقص المنتوجات الطبية والأدوات الصحية، وأيضا تأخر وصول لقاحات ضد كوفيد 19. من هنا وبعد العدوان الإجرامي على غزة والقدس وباقي المدن الفلسطينية، وخاصة في ظل جائحة كورونا، يتجه الفلسطينيون. ما في صوت؟ Is it okay? It's okay. طيب، والترجمة. لذلك يتجه الفلسطينيون لإعلان نموذجا جديدا، خاصة بعد إعلان الحكومة الفلسطينية إعلان الطوارئ بسبب الكورونا وبسبب إغلاق المعابر والحدود. يتجه الفلسطينيون لإعلان نموذجا للاقتصاد التضامني، وذلك من خلال اللجان الشعبية ومن خلال تأسيس جمعيات تعاونية واسعة ومتخصصة بقطاعات معينة، وخاصة التعاونيات الزراعية، وتكون هذه التعاونيات مدعومة من الاتحادات والنقابات العمالية على أساس التكافل والتضامن. وتم حقيقة تأسيس صندوق من قبل الحكومة الفلسطينية باسم وقفة عز، معتمدين على تبرعات القطاع الخاص بما فيه البنوك والشركات الكبرى. وأعود وأكرر إن وباء الكورونا متحالف جدا مع الاحتلال لضرب الاقتصاد الوطني الفلسطيني، وفلسطين كما قلت بفعل استمرار الاعتداءات والحصار والاعتداءات المستمرة لقطعان المستوطنين على المحاصيل الزراعية والمياه وإغلاق الطرق تحت حجج أمنية واهية، وخاصة أن انتشار الفيروس جرى داخل مدينة القدس المحتلة وضواحيها، وكذلك مدينة بيت لحم. ونواجه حقيقة وضع اقتصادي صعب جدا نتيجة تبعية الاقتصاد الفلسطيني لدولة الاحتلال المسيطرة على جميع المعابر والحدود وعلى إيرادات السلطة الفلسطينية المالية، فضلا عما تمارسه من قرصنة مالية لأموال المقاصة الفلسطيني. كل هذا حقيقة أدى إلى انكماش كبير بالاقتصاد الفلسطيني، ومن هنا تسعى السلطة الفلسطينية للانفكاك الكلي عن الاقتصاد الإسرائيلي وفق اتفاقية باريس المجحفة بين الطرفين بعد اتفاق أوسلو. وفلسطين تدعو دائما للتعاون والتكامل في المجال الاقتصادي والعلمي والطبي، لكن ذلك لن يتم إلا بإقامة سلام عادل وشامل ودائم مبني على قرارات الشرعية الدولية وإقامة الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة وعاصمتها القدس. وشكرا.
شكرا جزيلا dear Belal. I think that we should make some adjustment, a little adjustment to our program in order to keep the schedule update. So I suggest that we now can listen Honorable Alain Perea presenting his report, and then we consider the interventions for the first report and the second report. So if you don't mind, I will give the floor to Honorable Alain Perea, PAM Special Rapporteur on the Environment, to hear him the main highlights of his report on climate and environmental change in the region. Please, Honorable Perea, you have the floor.
Je vous remercie, cher ami. Excellences, chers collègues de la PM et invités distingués, chers collègues, c'est un honneur pour moi d'adresser encore une fois la session plénière de la PM en tant que rapporteur sur l'environnement. Aujourd'hui, j'ai le plaisir de vous présenter mon rapport sur la condition de l'environnement dans les régions euro-méditerranéennes du Golfe et du Golfe. Depuis notre dernière rencontre, nos vies ont radicalement changé et nos échanges depuis tout à l'heure le prouvent. Les uns et les autres, vous avez insisté sur ces sujets-là, notamment sur le côté économique, mais nous pouvons parler maintenant aussi du côté environnemental, climatique. L'année et demie écoulée nous a rappelé l'importance fondamentale de la relation entre l'humanité et la nature. Les mesures de confinement adoptées pour contenir la pandémie de Covid-19 n'ont donné qu'un répit apparent à l'environnement. Les émissions mondiales annuelles ont chuté de 5,8% par rapport au niveau de 2019. Et pourtant, la concentration atmosphérique de gaz à effet de serre à longue durée de vie a atteint de nouveaux records. Les tendances sont particulièrement alarmantes pour les économies et les sociétés de notre région. Je suis intimement convaincu que nous en sommes tous conscients. En effet, la Méditerranée a été définie comme un hotspot du changement climatique, nous en avons souvent parlé, en raison de son extrême exposition à la hausse des températures et à la rareté de l'eau. Ici, le réchauffement de l'air et de la mer augmente de 20% plus vite que la moyenne mondiale. Les vagues de chaleur marine et l'acidification de la mer emportent de graves pertes d'habitat et de biodiversité. Il a été aussi rappelé tout à l'heure par l'honorable Alia Bourhan, tous les enjeux liés à la salinisation des sols. Les vagues d'une fréquence et une intensité les plus élevées des événements météorologiques extrêmes, notamment les inondations et des sécheresses, sont attendues à l'avenir. D'ici 2050, les rives sud et est de la Méditerranée risquent de voir leur disponibilité en eau douce divisée par 2. Et en tant que décideurs, nous devons faire face à cette tâche difficile de gérer des ressources plus rares pour une économie et une population croissante. Mesdames et messieurs, chers amis, les données que j'ai collectées pour la rédaction de ce rapport sont déconcertantes. Chacun de nos pays a, d'une manière ou d'une autre, déjà commencé à subir les effets du changement climatique. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes à un tournant. La crise du Covid-19 a démontré que les politiques réactives sont insuffisantes pour faire face efficacement aux risques systémiques. Dans le même temps, le plan de relèvement post-pandémie nous offre une occasion exceptionnelle de remodeler notre trajectoire de développement économique. Et l'APM représente la plateforme adéquate pour développer des politiques coordonnées et factuelles afin de sauver notre environnement. Et derrière notre environnement, il s'agit de nos populations. Comme je l'ai souligné dans mon rapport, il existe 3 façons d'agir ensemble immédiatement. Je vais vous en parler rapidement. Premièrement, nous devons adopter des déclarations d'urgence climatique au niveau national et nous devons le faire rapidement. Déclarer une urgence climatique et environnementale en Méditerranée et dans le monde donnerait un sentiment d'urgence qu'exige la crise climatique actuelle. En suivant une trajectoire de business as usual, les températures dans nos régions augmenteraient de 5 degrés Celsius d'ici la fin du siècle. Les impacts d'un tel scénario sont inimaginables. Pour avoir une idée de cette perspective, une augmentation de la température de 2,5 degrés Celsius pourrait entraîner une réduction de 30% des rendements des cultures dans notre région. Nous devons prendre de toute urgence des engagements plus importants pour atteindre la neutralité carbone d'ici 2050. Et 2050, chers amis, c'est demain. Il faut viser des objectifs climatiques très ambitieux. Dans le cadre de ces efforts, l'APM continue de plaider pour une coalition régionale pour la neutralité carbone et pour l'adoption plus large d'une taxe carbone ajoutée. Comme l'a souligné notre conférencier principal de l'IRENA, l'APM aide les parlements membres à engendrer des mesures législatives pour mettre fin aux subventions, combustibles fossiles et intégrer des stratégies de transition énergétique dans le plan de relance. Aussi, dans un mois, l'Assemblée accueillera des consultations de haut niveau avec des scientifiques et des experts de l'ONU pour permettre aux parlementaires de se préparer aux grandes négociations sur le climat qui auront lieu à l'automne, c'est-à-dire à la COP26 organisée à Glasgow et à la COP22 en Méditerranée. Lors de ces 2 événements cruciaux pour notre région, l'APM représentera la voix des parlementaires de la Méditerranée, soulignant leur rôle décisif de surveillance vis-à-vis des gouvernements et les ministères de l'Environnement dans leur engagement envers les politiques climatiques. Deuxièmement, nous devons assurer la protection de la biodiversité et des ressources naturelles. La protection de nos terres, de nos eaux, de notre biodiversité est nécessaire pour préserver les ressources dont nous dépendons tous. 92% des stocks halieutiques de la mer Méditerranée sont surexploités. La population de poissons a chuté de 34% depuis les années 1950. Est-ce que cela est durable à long terme? Les quotas de capture n'ont de but que s'ils sont largement suivis. Nous devons renforcer notre collaboration et désigner des mesures immédiates et exceptionnelles afin d'assurer une politique intégrée de la pêche. Un scénario similaire se produit sur les terres où l'intensification agricole et l'expansion des terres irriguées modifient rapidement notre environnement. Le secteur agricole est responsable de la plus grande consommation d'eau douce de notre région. Pourtant, il peut également guider le passage des stratégies de gouvernance de l'eau plus résiliente. À cette fin, l'APM coopère avec son réseau de partenaires pour promouvoir des interfaces sciences-politiques et encourager la coordination intersectorielle et transnationale afin de développer les cadres législatifs intégrés pour une meilleure gestion de l'eau et des terres. Troisième et dernier axe, il faut intégrer la durabilité et la circularité dans nos modèles économiques. L'adoption de modèles économiques plus durables garantira une reprise résiliente et tournée vers l'avenir. Actuellement, plus de 200 tonnes de plastique sont déversées chaque jour en Méditerranée. L'amélioration des instruments de prévention et de contrôle de la pollution, comme le renforcement des systèmes circulaires de gestion des déchets, devrait devenir une priorité absolue pour nos gouvernements. Je l'avais dit lors d'une de nos précédentes réunions, nous avons voté en France une loi il y a 2 ans sur l'économie circulaire. Mais dans nos travaux, chers amis, je l'ai toujours rappelé, il n'est pas important que les uns disent nous avons fait ça, les autres sont en retard, ou que les uns essayent de donner des leçons aux autres. Ce qui est important, c'est que chacun, à partir de là où nous sommes, avec notre culture, avec nos façons de travailler et d'avancer, nous fassions tous un pas en avant. Et donc, dans ce que j'essaye de porter depuis maintenant 2 ans au sein de nos travaux, c'est vraiment cette logique-là. Et comme mon collègue, le rapporteur sur l'économie, ma collègue sur le rapporteur de l'économie, Marcin Tsukla, a remarqué dans sa présentation, la praticabilité à long terme de nos économies dépend de la protection de la nature et de nos paysages. Des secteurs cruciaux comme le tourisme exigent actuellement bien plus que notre environnement ne peut offrir. Cette industrie consomme 2,5 fois plus de ressources que l'écosystème méditerranéen ne peut en fournir. La relance du tourisme après Covid doit être basée sur des pratiques résilientes et durables et sur l'inclusion des communautés locales. Ce n'était qu'un exemple de la façon dont nous devons changer nos mentalités. Désormais, nous devons adopter une approche holistique lors de la conception de nos politiques, et ce, pour le bien-être de nos populations. Pour cette raison, l'APM met à disposition de ses parlementaires des plateformes d'échange, d'information et de bonnes pratiques sur la mesure à mettre en œuvre concrètement sur les transitions économiques nationales vers des modèles plus verts, circulaires et climatiquement neutres. Ce n'est que grâce à des politiques concertées et fondées sur la science que nous préserverons nos ressources et garantirons la prospérité socio-économique des générations futures. Chers collègues, j'ai fini mon propos et dans ce contexte, j'ai préparé une série de recommandations politiques concrètes pour aider les parlements membres à lutter contre le changement climatique et la dégradation de l'environnement dans le bassin méditerranéen. En particulier, j'ai souligné la nécessité de placer la durabilité des politiques liées au climat au centre des politiques fiscales et monétaires soutenant les plans de relance post-Covid 2019. Je sais que c'est très difficile. En France, au Parlement français, je mène et nous menons un combat sur ce sujet-là, mais nous n'arrivons malheureusement pas trop à avancer. Et si d'autres pays de la Méditerranée pouvaient le faire, eh bien, il nous servirait aussi de moteur pour que nous avancions tous ensemble. J'ai aussi invité les membres de l'APM à concevoir des politiques climatiques respectueuses des transitions locales, cohérentes à l'échelle régionale et garantissant l'accomplissement des objectifs de l'accord de Paris, de l'agenda 2030 et de la Convention de Barcelone. Pour finir, je suis au courant des commentaires sur le rapport et des recommandations de la part de la délégation turque. Je pense qu'elle prendra la parole lors du débat parlementaire. Je profite de cette occasion pour les remercier de leurs précieuses contributions et j'attends avec impatience d'entendre leurs commentaires, mais aussi tous ceux des autres délégations. Je voudrais maintenant demander au secrétaire général de l'APM, l'ambassadeur Sergio Piazzi, que je salue, de lire la liste complète des recommandations. Je vous remercie.
Merci bien, mon cher Alain, et merci pour la démonstration de la nécessité impérative d'action dans notre région. Now we will resume our debate and we will start with Cyprus delegation. Honorable Stefano, you have the floor.
Thank you very
Sorry,
much.
President, sorry. I have to read the recommendations of the report on
I'm very sorry, Sergio.
I apologize.
I missed that part. Sorry, excuse me.
Thank
Please
you.
go ahead, Sergio.
No, thank you. Otherwise, Honorable Pereira will never speak to me again. Thank you very much. And thank you to Alain Pereira for the excellent report. I will read now the recommendations. I, the rapporteur on environment, on behalf of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, alarmed by the overwhelming evidence of climate change and environmental degradation in the Mediterranean basin, and concerned that insufficient effort have been made at present to mitigate the long-term damage attributable to the current trends. B, alarmed by the scientific forecast predicting that average temperature in the Mediterranean could increase up to by 5 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. C, recognizing that the harmful economic, social, environmental consequences for the Mediterranean region if member states fail to implement comprehensive adaptation and mitigation strategies for the climate change. D, acknowledging that only climate mitigation and adaptation strategies that are inclusive of local communities and cultures have the capacity of being sustainable and resilient in the long term. E, recognizing that the continuity of commercial activities vital to economies in the Mediterranean basin, such as tourism, agriculture, and fishing, depend upon resource conservation and the protection of marine and terrestrial ecosystems. F, recognizing the need for greater enforcement and comprehensive implementation of climate-related policies at both the national and regional levels. G, convinced that multilateral frameworks like the Paris Climate Agreement, the Agenda 2030, the Barcelona Convention provide a valuable roadmap for the establishment and adoption of effective climate and environmental policies, reaffirming the PAM resolution unanimously adopted by member states on 3 February 2015 regarding the establishment of a carbon added tax. I, recognizing the importance of channeling financial resources toward green initiatives as part of national COVID-19 recovery efforts in order to promote sustainability and the development of circular and carbon neutral economies. J, emphasizing the critical importance of substantive progress in the global climate negotiation that will take place at COP26, achievable only through robust and ambitious nationally determined contributions. K, aware that member states must transform the objectives delineated through NDCs into tangible legislative actions. L, recognizing the value of strategic partnership for PAM that have served the interests of parliamentarians and the Mediterranean as a whole, and committing to the development of a robust science policy society interface for the fruitful implementation of national climate policies. I recommend, number 1, call on PAM parliaments to declare a climate and environmental emergency in the Mediterranean and globally, and prioritize policies and legislative actions that directly address climate change and environmental degradation in the region. Number 2, reiterate the importance of placing sustainability and climate-related policy at the center of fiscal and monetary policies supporting the COVID-19 recovery plans. Number 3, call its member state to regularly update member parliaments on progress achieved with regard to their commitments to international agreements and protocol on environmental protection and climate change. Invite PAM parliaments to regularly share progress achieved with the PAM Secretariat, and further invite the PAM Secretariat to disseminate the exchange of information and promote best national practices. Number 4, stress the importance of including and respecting local tradition, culture, and communities in developing climate policies via grassroots consultations, civil society participation, and stakeholders' engagement. Number 5, urge PAM parliamentarians to develop coherent regional strategies and capacity building instruments to accelerate the green transition of economies, with particular reference to the adoption of resource-efficient technologies such as precision irrigation systems and wastewater reuse solutions. Number 6, invite PAM parliaments to promote sustainable, responsible tourism practices throughout the region, thus ensuring the industry key role in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 7, encourage PAM Parliament to work on a cohesive ecosystem-based approach to fishery policies with the aim of ensuring long-term maintenance of fish stocks and marine biodiversity at large in the Mediterranean. Number 8, call on PAM Parliaments to adopt water, soil, and air pollution prevention and control mechanisms that directly address human and biodiversity welfare. Number 9, reaffirm the necessity of removing subsidies for non-renewable energy sources and supporting the development of carbon markets and the establishment of a carbon added tax. Stress the importance of adopting climate legislation comprehensive of environmental related security risk and of reinforcing regional information sharing to strengthen regional capacity building and climate adaptation and mitigation strategies. Number 11, invite its secretariat to reinforce ties with international financial institutions, the World Bank, IMF, ICB, EBRD, EIB, and the UN and EU relevant bodies, as well as to continue cooperation with the UNFCCC, UNEP, MAP, OECD, MEDREC, MEDZO, Plan Bleu, MEDEC, IRENA, and the Arab Forum for Environment and Development. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Sergio, and sorry for the precipitation. We will now resume our debate. So the first delegation to take the floor is Cyprus. Honorable Stefanos Stefanou.
Yes, I'm sending my greetings from Cyprus. Dear colleagues, my short intervention is on the previous topic for the impact of COVID-19. I think this is okay, yeah? So, the pandemic has caused huge problems and upheavals in the global economic and social structure. Even economically developed societies have been shaken and are paying heavy social and economic costs. There has also been an enormous cost in human lives. The consequences are even greater for the poor countries which, in addition to their terrible economic situation, face serious problems such as inequality, poverty, the lack of infrastructures, the non-existence or existence of deficient public health system, and downgraded and problematic welfare state. Similar problems exist in countries in the Mediterranean region too. Southern European countries are at a disadvantage more than the countries of Central, Northern, and Scandinavian Europe. Many countries in North Africa and the Gulf region face huge socioeconomic problems that are being exacerbated by COVID-19. The first step that must be taken is for rich and developed countries to provide effective and practical solidarity to poor countries. These countries must be helped to address problems in the health sector, economically, and in building the necessary infrastructures. Effective response to the pandemic lies in vaccinating the population. Poor countries need to be helped so they shall have access to sufficient quantities of vaccines for the provision of free universal vaccination. The profits of pharmaceutical companies must not be put above human lives. I must say that the debate in the European Union on vaccine patents has demonstrated once again that powerful centers of power and establishment forces and interests within the European structure are putting profits above people, and that is unacceptable. Poor countries must be helped financially by the richest countries to create or strengthen the necessary health infrastructures. This aid cannot be provided on unfavorable and painful terms for poor countries. Of course, conditions must be ensured for this aid to reach the people of each country and the resources must not be abused by local establishments, big and interwoven interests. Last but not least, I would like to stress the need for the richer countries to continue to express their solidarity and provide assistance to the poorest countries in the long run, and for these countries not to be abandoned at the mercy of the pandemic's consequences as soon as it's no longer in the news. Thank you very much.
Efkaristos. Now I will give the floor to my dear friend Majali Hwabi from Israel and PAM roving ambassador. You have the floor. Majali, are you online? So we proceed with.
I am
Majali,
sorry.
please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I'm very pleasant to attend this plenary this afternoon, and especially this debate, to listen to my colleagues from all over the countries. And I would like to say that I loved what my colleague from Jordan, Ali Aburan, said. And I am will be your counterpart in all the regional cooperation in all the fields for the benefit of the states and the people of the region. I think the next visit to the Middle East that the presidency will sign, we will deal with this cooperation and to move on, as I said, for the benefit of the region. What's bothering me, my colleagues from the Palestinian Authority, we cannot hide the social media. We cannot hide the facts. The whole world knows very well who opened fire towards the Israeli citizens. The Hamas and you know who's backing them opened fire to the Israeli cities, to the Israeli villages. More than 4,600 missiles shoot to these places. Israel react to this kind of terror. You know, Hamas, it's not recognize Israel. Also, they are not recognizing the Palestinian Authority. We cannot hide the truth. We must change the what we listen and hear from our colleagues from the Palestinian Authority. If we want to return back to the negotiation table, you must continue talking about different ways and different ways of blaming one side. The facts, we cannot hide it. The facts I can only give one economic example. The international community have been invested in Gaza $30 billion. 30, you hear the number? I can send all of these documents. $30 billion. Do you know what they have done for there? They make the metro. They make the bases for missiles. They make bases army under the schools, under the hospitals, under the places that they can hide themselves. And when they open the fire, they are running to hide themselves there. This is the way that we want to.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, my dear Majali, but
yeah, only
we are
the
talking
last
about
sentence.
economy. You can raise this issue tomorrow if you don't mind.
I don't know if you they have translated you what Bilal, my dear friend, spoke today, and also the others, Omar and the others in the morning. We must change this way of talking or speaking. We must put the facts in front of us. We must work and return back to cooperate in the economy in every field for the benefit of the people of the area, not only to blame each other. This is now we have the chance to rebuild the peace negotiations, to rebuild the way to return to direct negotiation in order to achieve peace for the benefit of all of the people of the region. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Majili. I believe that we all share that wish to resume the negotiations about the two-state solutions in the Middle East. Now I will give the floor to Honorable Sebastian Cernic from the Romanian delegation.
Thank you very much. Dear speakers, thank you very much for such a comprehensive analysis of the status quo and of the impact of the global pandemics on the regional economy. Dear colleagues, I believe that now, more than ever, we should join our efforts in overcoming together to the multiple challenges faced by all our countries. As presented in the reports, the tourism sector and the small and medium-sized enterprises have been the most affected by all the restriction imposed by the pandemics. Thus, I would like to share with you some of the good measures that proved efficient in Romania in addressing economic recovery and minimizing losses. Firstly, we focused on liquidity. We allowed the small and medium-sized enterprises to delay paying their taxes in order to avoid the loss of as many jobs as possible, and we created a few economic tools that included offering grants, facilitating loans, and encouraging investments and innovative and green developments. Although tourism is not a main component of the Romanian GDP, it still counts for 5% of the total, and boosting tourism can represent an efficient engine for economic recovery. To conclude, I believe that parliamentary cooperation is key for regional economic recovery, and we should all learn from each other's success stories so that we can move on. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person soon. Thank you very much again.
Thank you so much. Now I will give the floor to the Algerian delegation.
السيد رئيس الجمعية البرلمانية للمتوسط، السيدات والسادة زملائي أعضاء الجمعية البرلمانية للمتوسط، السادة الحضور، سعيد بتواجدي اليوم معكم في هذه الدورة، والذي يشرفني أساهم من خلالها مع زملائي الأعضاء البرلمانات المتوسطية في تجسيد الأهداف النبيلة للجمعية الموقرة، مواجهة التحديات التي تتزايد في العالم عموما وفي محيطنا المتوسطي على وجه الخصوص، لا سيما مع انتشار فيروس كورونا المستجد وتداعياته الخطيرة على المنظومة الدولية اقتصاديا وأمنيا، وعلى الاستقرار ووتيرة تنفيذ أهداف التنمية المستدامة في المنطقة. إنه لمن المؤسف أن نواجه تحديات جسيمة كهذه بعد قطع العالم أشواط المعتبرة في المسار الإنمائي كان ناشطا وواعدا، تغيرت بفضله ومن أجله سياسات وطنية، ووضعت استراتيجيات سخرت لها موارد ضخمة من أجل بناء أرضية صلبة للنمو الاقتصادي بكافة مجالاته. وبات اليوم مطلوبا منا إعادة تقييم وتقدير ومراجعة الأولويات وتغيير في التدابير وتكييف الخطط وجهود مضاعفة من أجل توفير الموارد الضرورية للإنعاش والإقلاع من جديد مع المحافظة على حد أدنى من الحياة الكريمة لشعوبنا وسط خيارات وفضاء مفتوح على كل الاحتمالات. في الجزائر اعتمدنا على نموذجا جديدا للنمو الاقتصادي، الغاية منه تنويع وتحويل الاقتصاد الوطني بحلول عام 2035، وقد حققنا مؤشرات جيدة في تسجيل أهداف التنمية المستدامة تعكس إرادة الدولة لمواصلة التزامها بتعزيز وتطوير مختلف القطاعات من أجل ضمان ظروف عيش كريمة للمواطنين. غير أن الجائحة فرضت التزامات طارئة تطلبت الاهتمام أكثر بترقية قطاع الصحة، باعتبار أن منه تبدأ مرحلة ما بعد الكورونا. فعملنا في الجزائر على تعزيز نظام الحماية الاجتماعية وتكثيف الرعاية الصحية للفئات الأكثر عرضة للخطر من الفيروس، وكذا إنشاء نظام خاص للمساعدة والمرافقة يخصص لمخطط وطني لتأطير والتعبئة للسكان. وفي هذا الإطار وقعت الجزائر مؤخرا على برنامج عمل بين وزارة الصحة والمنظمة العالمية للصحة يمتد على مدار سنتين، يهدف إلى تمكين الجزائر من الاستفادة من خبرة المنظمة لا سيما في مجال تطبيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. يسعى لتحديد أولويات التي يمكن للمنظمة أن ترافق فيها الجزائر في مجال الصحة، خصوصا ما يتعلق بالجانب التقني والخبرة، ويأخذ بعين الاعتبار الأولويات الصحية في الجزائر لتحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة. لقد فرض الوباء على الاقتصاد معركة جديدة، ولأن هذا الظرف العالمي الصعب يمس مباشرة المستوى المعيشي للسكان، سعت الجزائر إلى حماية الفئات الهشة من قسوة تبعات الأزمة من خلال تقديم منحة تضامن للأسر المحتاجة المتأثرة اجتماعيا واقتصاديا من تدابير الوقاية من الوباء ومكافحته، ومضاعفة الاهتمام بالمناطق والتي نسميها في الجزائر مناطق الظل، والتي تحوز على اهتمام خاص من طرف السيد عبد المجيد تبون رئيس الجمهورية. كما اعتمدت الجزائر على الحوار مع الشركاء الأجنبي الاجتماعيين والمتعاملين الاقتصاديين لاحتواء الضرر الذي لحق باقتصادنا الوطني. فأطلقت الحكومة الجزائرية مشاورات مع منظمات أرباب العمل والنقابات، الهدف منها أولاً التقييم على مستوى كل قطاع نشاط لآثار الأزمة الصحية على وضعية المؤسسات من الناحية المالية والتشغيل. ثانياً الإبقاء على النشاط الاقتصادي مستمراً في ظل التقيد الصارم بتدابير الوقاية من فيروس كورونا ومكافحته. إيجاد آليات لتعبئة المجال الاقتصادي وتسييره أمام هذا الظرف الاستثنائي الذي تجتازه البلاد بغرض الحفاظ على مناصب العمل والاستعداد لاستئناف النمو. كما شكلت الحكومة الجزائرية بتوجيه من السيد عبد المجيد تبون رئيس الجمهورية لجنة حماية يرأسها الوزير الأول، هدفها تقييم آثار الاقتصادية والاجتماعية لوباء كورونا واقتراح تدابير كفيلة بمواجهته، تتشكل من ممثلي منظمة أرباب العمل والجمعيات المهنية والعمالية والنقابية، إضافة إلى مراكز تفكير وكذا مجلس وطني اقتصادي واجتماعي تقوم على أساس التشاور للخروج بحلول ملموسة وتقديم اقتراحات واقعية. شملت هذه التدابير إجراءات ضريبية وشبه ضريبية، من بينها تعليق أعباء أرباب العمل خلال الفترة المتأثرة، وتدابير مصرفية إضافية بالإضافة إلى تدابير تتعلق بالصفقات العمومية، وتدابير دعم وإنعاش اقتصادي، من بينها إنشاء صندوق لمساعدة المؤسسات الصغيرة والمتوسطة التي تواجه صعوبات، والتوجه إلى السياحة الداخلية لإنعاش هذا القطاع ومرافقة قطاع الصناعة التقليدية. لقد أثبتت مرحلة انتشار فيروس كورونا أهمية الرقمنة التي كانت ملاذ العالم منذ نحو الخلاص، لذلك جدير بالذكر ما بعد الوباء أن تستثمر في هذا المجال من خلال توسعاته وتجديده في آليات التسيير. وفي هذا السياق نقوم في الجزائر بإعداد خطة مستعجلة للرقمنة على مستوى المحلي لتدارك التأخر، ونعمل على تجسيد أهداف الرقمنة على مستوى كافة القطاعات. في الأخير أؤكد أن تعافي الاقتصاد المتوسطي من تداعيات الوباء لا يمكن أن تتم دون تعاون وتنسيق بين وحدات بلدان منطقة المتوسط، ولا يجب أن تؤثر إجراءات الغلق على الحس الإنساني والتضامني بين الدول وشعوب العالم للخروج من هذا الأزمة بأقل قدر من الخسائر، كما يجدر بأن الاعتبار من دروس مستوحاة من هذه المرحلة الحرجة من تاريخ الإنسانية من خلال البحث عن مناهج جديدة أكثر نجاعة. وشكرا.
Shukran Jazilan. And now the floor goes to the Syrian delegation.
شكرا سيدي الرئيس. ما يمكن القيام به للحد من الأثر الاقتصادي لجائحة كوفيد-19 وأيضا السيد ألان بيريا حول التغيرات المناخية وأثرها الاقتصادي. الحقيقة وتعاون بين سواء البرلمانات أو الحكومات لوضع استراتيجيات وطنية، ولكن أريد أن أضيف إلى هذه الأسباب سببين يتعرض لهما وطني سوريا. فسوريا تتعرض للحرب منذ أكثر من 10 سنوات، إضافة إلى ذلك هناك الإجراءات الأحادية الجانب والحصار الجائر دون مرجعية قانونية يتعرض لها الشعب السوري. وهنا أريد أن أتحدث بما سبقني إليه زملائي، إذ كيف نستطيع أن نضع مشاريع معاش اقتصاد أو خطط لتعزيز النمو أو إجراءات لتنشيط السياحة في الوقت من هذه الإجراءات وهذا الحصار في غذائه وفي دوائه وفي تعليمه وفي فرص العمل التي لا يستطيع الحصول عليها بسهولة في الوقت الحالي. يقولون أن هناك استثناء من هذه الإجراءات ومن هذا الحصار حول الغذاء والدواء، إذ يمكن أن تستورده سوريا سواء كحكومة أو كأفراد. وهناك من يسمعني الآن هم أكثر من 120 زميل، وأنا أطلب من أحد الزملاء أن يسمي لي بنكا واحدا يقبل بتحويل الأموال من كراء الغذاء والدواء المستثنات حسب قولهم في هذا الموضوع. ما أطلبه الآن هو إلغاء هذه الإجراءات الأحادية الجانب ورفع الحصار عن وطن سوريا، وعدم استخدام مثل هذه الترتيبات لفرض مواقف سياسية على الدول المستقلة وذات السيادة. آثار مثل هذه الترتيبات كارثية على الشعوب، وهي إجراءات إنسانية تعاقب شعوب ولا تعاقب حكومات. سوريا عضو في برلمان البحر الأبيض المتوسط، وتأثير متبادل مع دوله، وشعبها صديق لشعوبه. في الجنوب من سوريا أيضا هناك معاناة اقتصادية مشابهة، وإن كانت بصورة مختلفة لدى الشعب الفلسطيني الذي يعاني من غطرسة الكيان الصهيوني واحتلاله لأراضي فلسطين بالقوة وفرض نظام الفصل العنصري. أختم بالقول: حق القوة طغيان، والشعوب هي من تدفع الثمن. شكرا سيدي.
شكرا جزيلا. Now the floor goes to the Tunisian delegation. Honorable Kenza Ayala, you have the floor.
شكرا جزيلا. هل تسمعونني؟ هل الصوت واضح؟
Yeah, please proceed.
شكرا جزيلا. السيد رئيس برلمان المتوسط وكل القائمين عليها، الزملاء وزميلات، تحية طيبة. بداية اسمحوا لي أن أتوجه بتحية للشعب الفلسطيني الصامد أمام غطرسة الكيان الصهيوني. تحية لكل شعوب المتوسط الصامدة ذات التاريخ المجيد. شكرا على التقارير المعروضة من قبل الزملاء والزميلات رؤساء اللجان. في الحقيقة الوضع الاقتصادي، الاجتماعي، البيئي، السياسي وغيرها يختلف من دولة إلى أخرى من حول المتوسط، لاختلاف في مقدرات وإمكانيات كل دولة من هذه الدول، إلا أن جائحة كورونا أصابت الكل ولم تستثني أحدا دولا وشعوب. ولعل هذا العامل يجعلنا نراجع خياراتنا شيئا ما، بحيث نفكر بمنطق المجموعة لا بمنطق كل دولة وشأنها، حتى نتصدى لهذا الوباء وما خلفه من مشاكل اقتصادية واجتماعية، خاصة على صعيد الدول التي لا موارد أولية هامة وكبرى لها كتونس، التي واجهت صعوبات جمة في التصدي لما نتج عن كوفيد-19. فالأزمة الاقتصادية العالمية زائد جائحة كورونا جعل بعض الدول كتونس تعاني صعوبات أكثر من غيرها. غلق الحدود، توقف النشاط السياحي، توقف وتعطل النشاط التجاري وخاصة التصدير، انحدار الدينار، تراجع التشغيلية وارتفاع نسبة البطالة، تعطل المرافق كثيرة وعديدة جدا، بروز هشاشة كبرى في البنية التحتية الصحية. كل هذا جعل من بلادنا تعاني مشاكل كبيرة، ومع ذلك تجند الكل هنا، حكومة وبرلمان ومجتمع مدني ومجهودات شعبية ومنظمات من أجل دعم العائلات المحتاجة بمنح ولو كانت بسيطة ولكنها كانت ضرورية من أجل ضمان عيش كريم على الأقل، دعم الشركات والمؤسسات الصغرى بمنح أيضا ومساعدات مادية، اتخاذ إجراءات عمل عن بعد ودراسة خاصة الدراسة الجامعية. فكلها بطبيعة الحال من أجل محاولة التصدي لهذا الوباء اللعين وما نتج عنه من انعكاسات على وضعنا الاقتصادي والاجتماعي. هذا الوباء وإن جعلني أتكلم بصعوبة فلإصابتي به وهو يقعدني إلى اليوم. عليه إذن نحتاج اليوم أكثر من أي وقت مضى كدول المتوسط والخليج إلى ضرورة التعاون من أجل تحقيق تبادل وتوازن طاقي وبيئي، تبادل تجاري وصناعي، تدعيم الاستثمار وخاصة في مجال البناء الصحي والقطاع الصحي، تدعيم التلقيح، نحتاج إلى التلقيح، تبادل الخبرات والتجارب والحد من البطالة بتنظيم الهجرة وفق تعاون مدروس. اليوم منتوج فلاحي بيولوجي وفير جدا في تونس لا يجد سبيله للتصدير، فالانتعاش الاقتصادي والتعافي من الوباء يتطلب إجراءات شجاعة من الجميع، إجراءات وسياسات تجعل كل دول المتوسط تحقق تنمية مستدامة وتراعي البيئة كذلك، استقرار اقتصادي. فالضفة الجنوبية والشرقية للمتوسط يحتاجون إلى دول وشعوب الضفة الشمالية. لذلك فإن البحر المتوسط يصبح فعلا بحر التنمية، بحر العلاقات الصادقة بين الدول والشعوب من أجل البقاء والعيش الكريم لكل المحيطين به، ويفخر الفرد منا بالقول بأنه من شعوب دول المتوسط. برلمان المتوسط بكل خبراته وكل المشاركين فيه يستطيع وضع سياسة اقتصادية واجتماعية وبيئية تتحد فيها كل الشعوب والدول وتجد فيها ظلتها حتى نبني قوى تواجه الصعوبات المحدقة بنا. في الختام شكرا لك سيدي الرئيس، خاصة لتدخلك وإيقاف ما كان يريد أن يغالط به ممثل دولة الصهاينة الحضور. شكرا لك على حياديتك وعلى حسن تسييرك للجلسة، وشكرا لكل المستمعين.
Shukran. Now I will give the floor to my colleague Francisco Rocha from Portugal.
Thank you, Pedro. Dear colleagues, I would like to begin by congratulating Honorable Alain Pereira for his excellent work on this report and recommendation which I endorse. Climate change and environmental degradation have posed an existence threat of the Mediterranean region and the whole of the last few decades. Now is time to act. Our common framework for action is the United Nations 2030 Agenda and these Sustainable Development Goals. They can only be reached with the active involvement of local and regional authorities. We need to develop coordinated national and Mediterranean-wide environmental management and set up development plans focusing on coastal areas. there is an urgent need to introduce effective measures to protect the environment from threats arising from maritime transport, coastal works, maritime and agriculture exploitation, wastewater discharges, industrial and oil pollution. Governments like my own in Portugal have recognized this urgency and put climate change at the top of their priorities. The first strategic challenge in Portuguese government's program is precisely climate change, tackling climate change, ensuring a just transition. As MPs, we must hold governments accountable and ensure that these commitments are not mere rhetoric. Portugal has defended greater ambition in the goals of 2030, establish a reduction of gas emissions in the order of 55%, with the ambition of zero greenhouse gas emission by 2050. It is up to us, MPs, to develop national policies in close cooperation that combat and adapt to climate change. We need to act locally and regionally so that the impact will be global. Thank you all. Thank you all.
Obrigado. Thank you. Now, we are a little bit behind schedule, so I will give the floor to Honorable Merai from Palestine, and after his intervention, the floor returns to the Prime President in order to end the program of today. So, Honorable Merai, you have the floor.
سيداتي وسادتي، تحية مرة أخرى، تحية لكل المتضامنين مع فلسطين وشعبها إلى دول البحر الأبيض المتوسط وشعوبها. أنا بحب أعرج على موضوع مهم جدا، وهو موضوع البيئة في فلسطين. إن دولة فلسطين لديها الاعتقاد الجازم المثبت بالأدلة الواقعية والقانونية إن دولة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي وأجهزتها العسكرية والتنفيذية والمستوطنون يشنون حربا بيئية صامتة تستهدف عناصر ومكونات البيئة والطبيعة الفلسطينية باعتبارها أحد أهم مكونات المجتمع الفلسطيني ركنا أساسيا من هويته الوطنية، وذلك من خلال خطة وسياسة حكومية عامة وممنهجة تعتمدها حكومة دولة الاحتلال منذ بداية الاحتلال عام 1967. ولقد طورت مجموعة من النظم والتشريعات الإدارية والبنية التحتية الداعمة والمحفزة لها. إن الانتهاكات الإسرائيلية تستهدف كل المجالات البيئية، والتي منها السيطرة على أنواع المصادر الطبيعية من ماء وحجر وتراب وغاز ونفط، وحتى الثروة السمكية، والتسبب بتلوث خطير للهواء من خلال نقل المناطق الصناعية الخطرة إلى الأراضي الفلسطينية، بما يقرب 19 منطقة صناعية تضم ما لا يقل عن 500 مصنع من الصناعات الكيماوية والبلاستيكية واللدائن وتكرير الزيوت المعدنية والدباغة، والصناعات العسكرية الإسرائيلية وغيرها من الصناعات الخطرة التي يمنع إنشائها في الأراضي الإسرائيلية، والتي تسبب في إنتاجها كميات ضخمة من النفايات الخطرة التي يمنع إنشائها في الأراضي الإسرائيلية، والتي تسبب في إنتاج كميات ضخمة من النفايات الخطرة وإطلاق الغازات والأبخرة والعوادم والمياه العادمة. وإلقاء نفايات خطرة، بالإضافة إلى ما لا يقل عن 7 كسارات ضخمة تقوم بعملية سرقة الحجر الفلسطيني وإرساله إلى إسرائيل والمستوطنات في الأراضي الفلسطينية المحتلة، وإقامة المستوطنات على الأماكن الخضراء، وبالتالي إنها سياسة ممنهجة تؤدي إلى سياسة التصحر والجفاف من خلال السيطرة على الموارد المائية في أراضي دولة فلسطين، وإقامة بؤر استيطانية، وإقامة جدار الفصل العنصري، مما له آثار سيئة جدا على البيئة والمواطنين الفلسطينيين. وهناك نقطة خطيرة جدا، دولة إسرائيل تقوم في تهريب النفايات الخطرة من الدولة الإسرائيلية والمستوطنات إلى دولة وإلى أراضي دولة فلسطين. وهذا الأمر طبعا نحن نعرف أنه في أوروبا وفي دول المتوسط في هناك العديد من الأحزاب، وبطبيعتها الأحزاب التي تنادي بالخضار ووجود مساحات شاسعة، وهو الحزب الخضر. فيجب علينا نحن في المتوسط أو في دولة في برلمانات البحر المتوسط أن نلقي أو نتلاقى في خطاب موحد خاص له علاقة في البيئة وخصوصا في الأراضي الفلسطينية، لأنه دولة الاحتلال بالفعل تقضي على العديد أو على كثير من الأراضي أو من المحميات الطبيعية الفلسطينية، وخصوصا المحميات الطبيعية الملاصقة للبحر الأبيض، للبحر الميت، والتي تقوم في تجفيف أجزاء كبيرة منه وامتصاصه من أجل استخدام هذه الأملاح في الصناعات الإسرائيلية وصناعات التجميل. فمن هنا احنا بنطالب كأعضاء برلمانيين فلسطينيين أن يلتفت دول البحر المتوسط وبالأخص كمان الاتحاد الأوروبي لهذه الممارسات اللي لها أثر سيء جدا على البيئة الفلسطينية والبيئة المجاورة، لأنه البيئة متصلة إذا كانت بفلسطين أو في أي دولة أخرى. شكرا وتحياتي.
Shukran Jazilan. Now we reach the end of the interventions. The people that are inscribed for the other interventions will have the opportunity to take the floor tomorrow during the session of the first standing committee. So I return the floor to President Karem Dervish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pedro. And before thanking you, I wish to thank all the speakers who took part, and the speakers also who had an understanding about the urgency to end our session now due to being half an hour past the time we should have ended at 5 o'clock. In this capacity, I wish to thank the interpreters for their excellent work and for keeping up with us and doing an excellent job for all of us. And fully support and endorse what Pedro said about giving the chance to our colleagues for their understanding, not speaking tomorrow, to speak in the first standing committee as a courtesy for their understanding. Having said that, I wish to thank Pedro very much for the excellent work of the second standing committee, of the work that has been done 1.5 years now, for the work of the rapporteurs, of the whole group, the whole team. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you for the second standing committee. And as usual, it's always a pleasure to listen to you and to your insight. Thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for being here today for this very vivid and live discussions. Look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, 9 a.m. Kindly, 9 a.m. we will start with the first standing committee chaired by Her Excellency Alia Buran. Look forward to seeing you. Have a great evening.